that people from the West come and settle in the Middle East.
It is going crazy. I mean, it's like, what on earth is even happening?
What's a woman?
Yeah. If you identify as LGBTQIA2SA LMNOP+,
Everybody is walking naked on the streets. You have to do the same thing.
teachers saying, no, you're really a she, you're not a he, we're going to call you by a different name.
And when you let go of faith, then everything else is welcomed.
The very existence of a law, they've exchanged it for a lie, which is
With ice cream and, they're just
Oh, yeah.
crossing the streets, and as if all of these naked, wicked women, they don't exist.
suicide rates among transgendered people who have transitioned. They are the same rate as Jews in the Nazi concentration camps.
The strict rules about raising the rainbow flags and so on in the stadium.
These ideas are in our kids' face every day, until they take over.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My dear brothers and sisters, welcome to Dome Podcast, and I'm your host Hatim Abdissalaam. And today I have a special guest. My honorable guest today is Mr.Lucas Skrobot. I hope I pronounce your name perfectly.
MashaAllah.
Mr. Lucas is a podcast host of his own show, The Lucas Skrobot Show, and he discusses cultural and geopolitical events in his podcast. And he's also one of my favorite bakers.
Wow.
He's the owner and the baker of Roots Bread Bakery. Assalamu alaikum, Lucas.
وعليكم السلام.
كيف حالك؟
الحمد لله. وأنت؟
ماشي أخبار؟
ماشي.
ماشي علوم؟
ماشي الحمد لله. علومي زينة. وأنت هوشك بوشك.
هوش زين. It's nice to have you, man, on the show. I'm very excited. We've planned this, for a very long time, and finally, it's a reality.
We're here.
We were here the day before yesterday, and then the power went off. So thank God today, alhamdulillah, we have power. We can do the show. So Lucas, today we're going to talk about some concepts.
Yes.
Mainly Western concept and Middle Eastern concept. The first thing I want to ask you is about you living in Oman.
Yes.
Because as you know, in the past 100 years, it used to be the other way around, where people from the East would migrate to the West to look for a comfortable living, to look for opportunities. But now there's a shift in the trend that people from the West come and settle in the Middle East. Why is that, Lucas?
Yeah, I guess a couple things. I still, evidence shows that immigration to America is still massive. I think America is still the most immigrated nation towards. And as the Middle East has come up, oil, there's better job opportunities.
Yeah.
So there's a large incentive, even financially, for people in the West to come and get jobs here in the East, because in developing countries, there's more opportunity to move up or be in a higher position in the rank. If you are in the West grinding on at your 9-to-5 job, you're trying to climb the corporate ladder and there's 30 people up above you and you're like, hopefully one day I'll be the CEO, but it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
So I think that's one reason. For us specifically, we had some friends out here in Muscat and they invited us to visit back in 2011. And so my wife and I came out. We didn't even have any kids then. We have 4 now. And we visited and wow, it felt like home. We fell in love. And so we went back home, had our first child, and then we've now had 4 other boys here in the Khalij, here in the Middle East. And so 9 years here now.
That's the thing. I understand, single people who come to the Middle East to seek an opportunity, but families, big families, you have 4 kids, mashallah.
Yeah.
To try and raise your kids in the Middle East, which is totally different, than the West. What is attracting people from the West to start their families or raise their kids in the Middle East?
Yeah, I will say raising your family away from your immediate family presents a lot of challenges. As anyone who has migrated away from maybe the Middle East to the West, they have challenges. They don't necessarily instantly have a peer group or a friend group. They don't have their aunties and uncles and grandparents to take care of their kids. Yeah. So raising your family here presents a huge set of challenges. But I think one of the things that my wife and I find, I don't know if comforting is the right word, we feel blessed that right now, the state of the West, as we know, probably from the title of the show, it is going crazy. I mean, it's like, what on earth is even happening when it comes to the indoctrination of children, specifically in the school system? Yeah. I don't know the last time you were in America. The last time I was in America was in 2019, and it was a different world. The LGBT agenda, I think we were there during Pride Month. And Pride Month, for those who don't know, apparently,
yeah, we don't know.
Apparently,
what's a Pride Month?
If you identify as LGBTQIA2SA LMNOP+, so the acronym, at one point there was a sign with 27 different identifications. So I don't know if I can say the lesbian, LG, gay, bisexual, transsexual, or queer, binary, cis. There's millions of genders. So that's what in the ideology of the movement, there are millions of genders. There's an infinite amount of genders and identifications, and
isn't that a little bit overwhelming? I don't mean only for the kids, but even for the adults, to cope with. Such a thing.
It's I think beyond overwhelming. I think it is delusional. The right word is delusion. It is a delusion that the West, not all, but the prominent voice in the West has fallen under. And so being able to raise your kids away from that conversation, away from those pressures of when you're at a young age having to wonder, is my primary school teacher of my kids, are they indoctrinating my children? Are they, when my son goes to primary school, grade 1, grade 2, is the doctor saying, or the teacher saying, no, you're really a she, you're not a he, we're going to call you by a different name.
Oh, now you can be
and then call the police on you.
Oh, now you can be a cat or a dog or anything that comes into your mind.
It is a delusion. It is a full-blown delusion, and it is a delusion because they've denied the truth. The West has denied the truth. And so the thing that brought you and I together, Hatim, if I remember correctly.
Yes, the bread.
Okay, it was the bread. I remember someone shared one of your posts on Instagram, and you were sharing about dream interpretation. I'm like, oh yeah, I love dream interpretation. I love dreams. I love the spiritual realm. And I'm like, oh, I jive with this guy. We think in many of the same ways. And so is that affinity for both of us being men of faith, both of us being men who fear God. Yes. Well, in the West, they have exchanged the truth for a lie. Yeah. They have exchanged the truth of the existence of God, the very existence of a law. They've exchanged it for a lie, which is there is no God, and you are God. You are your own God. You are your own truth.
The thing is, Lucas, if I may say, how were people deceived into this?
I'm glad you asked that question.
How did they, buy this idea?
Yes.
How did they? So to us in the Middle East, it's a total strange, phenomenon.
Yes.
We can't seem to digest the idea. How did it happen?
So in order to understand, because if we were to go on the rest of the show and try to dissect what is happening, what's the right way to respond to a kid who's confused about their gender, do we say, no, it's not, and we stomp our foot down hard and then be accused of being bigoted or being accused of being closed-minded when really we're trying to do what's best for the child?
And you're normal.
And we're normal.
10 years ago, this was normal.
Yeah. And especially, it's a little bit of a tangent, especially when you look at the suicide rates among transgendered people who have transitioned, they are the same rate as Jews in the Nazi concentration camps. So it's clear that something psychologically is terribly wrong. So of course, we'd want to protect our kids from that. But there's a delusion that's taking place. And if we try to dissect what's happening on this level, on each individual point, we would become confused. And that is the entire agenda of the movement. So we have to take a couple steps back to understand postmodernism. So postmodernism, it's a big word, but I'm going to break it down into the simplest form so that you can understand it.
Yes.
Postmodernism, at its core, says there is no truth. There is no objective reality. You might not be sitting there. I might not be sitting here. You listening, you might not be listening to me.
This is very foreign to us. You know, I can't digest the idea of you saying this, because I've watched a documentary where this guy is doing a documentary talking about women.
Yeah.
And he goes to university professors and asks them, what's a woman?
Yeah.
And he doesn't get a straight answer. Nobody can say.
No one can. A woman is anyone who identifies as a woman. Well, so if I identify as a woman, then what am I identifying as? I don't know. It's nothing. It's like it's become undefinable. But this is, again, it goes back to postmodernism. Postmodernism says words don't really have meaning except meaning that we attribute to them. And therefore, we can deconstruct a word and it can mean anything. So we can deconstruct gender. What is gender? Well, it's just men have certain feelings and women have certain feelings. But really, when we think about it, maybe a man has more feelings like a woman and therefore they're a woman. So, but the underlying basis of this movement, of the LGBT agenda, comes out of postmodernism, which started with Kant back in the 1700s, I believe. And the birth of it was Kant saying, for the sake of faith, I will set aside truth. Now, in the Christian worldview, in our Christian belief,
yes,
Isa Masih, Jesus Christ, told us that we are to worship God in spirit, so our heart, our emotion, our life, and in truth.
yes.
And so we are called to do both. And if we let go of truth, what happens? Absurdity happens. History progresses a little bit more, and we come to the late 1800s, turn of the 20th century, and we have Marx and Engels. Marx started Marxism. You don't need to know a whole lot about Marx, except that he was the one that started communism, and he said there is no such thing as morality. There's no such thing as real virtue. There's only power. And he believed if we set up by force, not by people's will, but by force, a government system that controlled everything and made everything equal, then everyone would be happy. So they thought that capitalism, which is the fact that you can produce something and sell it to me without any sort of intermediary at whatever price you want.
Yes.
They thought that capitalism for sure was going to fall and communism and socialism was going to take over the world. Instead, what we saw was millions of people being killed in the USSR, being taken to concentration camps. Why? Because they had a stone chimney, because they were considered the rich. They were considered the bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie is another big word for the ruling class. And so they stripped farmers of land, it caused man-made famines, and the nation was destroyed. We saw the same thing when communism was implemented in China. It didn't take long before they realized that under capitalism, the simple men and women like you and me, when we are free to work and earn the money from our work based on how hard we work, we grow into the middle class and we grow into the upper class.
And that's a right.
And that's a right. That's
Yes.
a God-given right. If you work, you should get paid. If you don't work, you shouldn't eat.
Yes.
This is a God-given right.
And it's logic.
It is logic. They realized they realized that socialism wasn't going to take over the world. And so then they came up with a set of plans, and they came up with a set of 45 different goals of how to overthrow Christian Judeo morals. That would be morals that Islam, that all the Abrahamic faiths share at its base and core.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the thing holding people together.
Yes. Faith.
And when you let go of faith, then everything else is welcomed, because faith gives you the direction.
Yes.
On how you should regulate your life.
Yes.
Because it comes from divine, from a higher authority.
Yes.
So when you lose that moral compass that you have, which
Yes.
is through faith, then everything becomes okay. It becomes normal. It becomes
Absolutely.
acceptable. Now the challenge I want to ask you, Lucas, is now Western families that are moving to the Middle East and settling and raising their kids, there is a possibility always that, we'll have to go back home.
Mm-hmm.
What will happen to our kids after living in an environment like this, a safe environment, going back and then it's going to be a cultural shock for them to be introduced again to such a things while for a very long time they maybe have not heard of that. They've not come across such things.
Yeah.
So aren't you personally worried about...
I'm not. I mean, of course, every parent is. I know you're trying to pivot to the next question, but let me finish this thought, because this thought will be a foundation of how we can understand what's behind the chaos that's happening.
Yeah.
And if we can understand what's behind the chaos, we'll be able to equip our kids. Yes. You know, my wife and I, we feel capable of equipping our kids to face that one day, because we're building them in a way that has a basis of faith and a basis of truth.
Yes.
Thomas Aquinas, who is a famous Christian philosopher in the 1200s, he said that there's 4 different kinds of laws. There's eternal law, which would just be pretty much the essence of who God is. There is divine law, which is what you were referring to.
Scriptures and
Scripture.
so on. Yeah.
These are things that have been revealed to man. The West has denied that there's any sort of God revelation given to man. But we, as people of the book, we believe that the book is God's laws given to us.
Yes.
And then there would be human laws, which is like, wear a seatbelt when you drive. And those things can change.
Yeah.
And so those are important to hang on to. But under postmodernism, under Marxism, they want to undermine that. And the way they said we're going to undermine this is we're going to get into schools and we're going to control schools. We're going to control the curriculum. We're going to control the media. We're going to cause students to spark riots to upend societies. This is what we saw in America in 2020 with the George Floyd riots. We saw riots. We're like, what is going on? It is this movement. They said their goal was to make art meaningless. You look at Western art and it's just lines and chaos. To do away with all sorts of government censorship against obscenity laws, and to break down cultural standards of morality and to make pornography, obscenities, and normal in books, magazines, and TV, and to make the LGBT movement as something that is normal. That was their goal. So when we look at why is this happening, we realize this LGBT movement, it is just a tool to upend society to establish something far more dangerous than the LGBT movement. And so when we begin to understand that there are people and a movement of 100 years of history planning this, we can then see the schemes of the enemy, the schemes of Shaitan, because this is something that it truly is demonic. It truly is set up to destroy morality, to destroy families, to destroy the stability of society. And when we understand that, then we can stop worrying about these small arguments down here, and we can train our kids up in a way that they are able to go out into the world and affect the world.
And that's why it's important to hold on to one another and to raise our kids that we are normal.
Yes.
What is going on in the world is crazy.
Yes.
Because in today's world, having such views that you have mentioned, or the views or the values that we're sharing together, might be alienated when we go to such places, because it's no longer normal to feel this way.
No.
You have to be with the crowd, with everybody else, you know.
Yeah.
Everybody is walking naked on the streets. You have to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Everybody has his own label of who they are, what gender they are. You have to fall into
Yes.
the place. Now, the thing is that is really, concerning, especially people in the Middle East and in the Muslim world, is that, okay, this is happening in the Western world. It's up to them, yeah? This is what they believe in. It's up to them.
Yep.
But the problem starts when it is imposed on other nations, like Africa.
Yes.
You've seen so many interviews with African leaders, and they totally refuse this, because they say, we run our countries based on what the people want. And to the people of Africa, this type of behavior is not acceptable. It's not welcomed. So why are you trying to impose this on us?
It's insane.
And this is the thing.
I mean, I know why.
Even if we go further, I'm going to shift around the ideas. We're heading towards the World Cup in Qatar. And recently there has been an announcement about the strict rules about raising the rainbow flags and so on in the stadium.
Yeah.
There was a lot of backlash on Twitter and social media platforms talking about this, that this is something that is our right, we have to do it, why is Qatar being so harsh and so on. But to the people in the Middle East, they have certain values that they want to hold on with. I don't know, we might not understand the Western philosophy. What do you think, Lucas?
I think what this is touching on is freedom of speech.
Yes.
Freedom of expression. And what is interesting about what is happening in the West regarding this is the progressive, because it's a progressive movement. They say, well, Hatim, you're being bigoted. You're being closed-minded. How could you be so hateful? And you're saying, wait a minute, I'm not being hateful. I'm saying, you go ahead and do that.
I'm
going to be over here.
Yeah.
But unless you agree and affirm them, then you're closed-minded.
Now let's go back to the word bigotry. You mentioned bigotry. What does it mean? If someone labels me, Hatim, as a bigot person, what does it mean?
Audatan, normally it means it's someone who is closed-minded, who is very strict, and isn't willing to change, and hates anyone that doesn't think and look exactly like them. Which then here's the deep, deep irony. When you look at everything that's happening within the movement, who's the real closed-minded group? Is it the group that's saying, okay, I understand that you have some issues, you have something going on, and you want to live a certain way. Okay, ahlan wa sahlan, like, go for it. But we're going to live this way. And they're saying, no, we are going to enforce this on you, and if you don't look like us, if you don't accept us, who's the real closed-minded and bigot in this situation?
Lucas, excuse me, excuse my ignorance. It's just too confusing, because on one side you're dictating to us that we should have the freedom of speech, and when we express our freedom of speech, what we think, we become bigotry. So it's very confusing, man. We don't know. Do you want us to have freedom of speech, or do you want us to be, to be labeled as bigotry?
And that's why you have to go back to everything that I talked about in the first bit of the show to understand. It has nothing to do with whether you're a bigot or not a bigot, or what you believe or you don't believe. It is all about causing fear and intimidation to retreat and give more ground until they take over, until you lose your voice completely. This is what they did in the USSR. That is what communism and socialism does. It is a tool. And so it is confusing. It's in a Western American English talk, I don't know. We call it gaslighting, where you tell people one thing and then you're like, well, you're the one that's controlling me. And you're like, no, you're making that up. And so you're making people question their reality. And that's what they're doing on a large scale. When it goes back to freedom of speech, as you pointed out, within the LGBT movement, there is not freedom of speech, which you think there would be. I've interviewed feminists. There's different waves of feminists, but this one in particular, we had an interview, and at the end of the interview, she essentially told me I had to edit all these things out because she was afraid of what her peer group would think about what she said, what she believes. And so she was self-censoring, because in this movement, unless you fall exactly in step with what they believe, you'll be shut down. Which this leads to a bigger question. How do we then equip our children to combat this and not fall prey to it? If we operate in the same way that they do,
which is,
unless you think this way, I'm going to shut you down, I'm going to shame you, I'm going to beat you into submission. And if you disagree with me, if you insult me, I'm going to retaliate with violence. This is what the movement does. If we respond the same way, we will lose our kids. Hands down. And this is why. Because freedom of speech is required for freedom of thought. Right now, in our conversation, you and I were thinking. Yes. I'm testing out my ideas in the world. You're testing out your ideas in the world. And we're both trying to come to what is the truth. And it's freedom of thought, which is needed for freedom of belief. And so if we deny our children the freedom of belief, they will go with the crowd who's doing the same thing, denying freedom of belief, because they will then be accepted, and at least they're going to be, in the in-group and not the out-group.
Lucas, discussing about this brings us to something very important. That we are sitting on the same table as two parents.
Yes.
We are concerned for our kids. That makes us the same. We have the same feelings, we have the same thoughts, we have the same concerns. But we have been deluded for the past 100 or 200 years that we are enemies.
Yes.
And that's the idea that has been propagated.
Yes.
In the West, that Arabs or Muslims are the enemy. And on our side, the same thing. People had the feeling that, the West, everybody's the same. They all hate us. But in reality, we have the same concerns.
Yeah.
So we have been deceived in thinking that we are very different. But we are not. So, and I'm sure when we get together as families, as people of different nations, having the same concerns, they're going to fight against us. They don't like this. So how can we stick together, Lucas, as the people of the world? People who still base their lives on morality, on faith, on doing what is right, on standing for their rights. Because what we see today, a lot of families, they are put into the system or shoved into the system. They don't have the guts to say no. I don't want this for my kids.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
I'll not believe in this, which is very strange to us people in the Middle East. Why? Because we are used to seeing the West always speaking up their mind. So if the tax go up, you see people doing riots. They're on the streets. They don't like this. If the president is corrupt, they will always have a riot and you want to kick him out of office. If anything is like when the health insurance system, collapsed or they changed, people, were very upset and they spoke about it.
Yeah.
But when it came to this, nobody seems to, be able to speak up. Although I'm sure there is a lot of people out there in the Western world, they feel this way. They don't like what they see.
Mm-hmm.
They're not comfortable. But why don't they have the power to speak up?
Well, they lost it over a number of decades. So, as the movement took over the institutions, the education, the government, the media, because they're in control of the media, really, that follows lockstep. Slowly and slowly, people stopped speaking up. People stopped speaking truth.
Yes.
They stopped saying what they believed because they were afraid of backlash. And so it's a common tactic of if you say something that I don't agree with or believe, if I can threaten you, intimidate you, and cause fear, then the next time that you want to say something, you're going to think, should I disagree right now? Is it worth the fight that I'm going to have? And this is common in marriages.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at abusive marriages, and it could be the husband or the wife.
You're going to get in trouble now.
I'm going to get in trouble.
I'm not going to edit this.
No, but it's
Yeah.
true. It's abusive relationships.
Yeah.
It's an abusive relationship where if you say, hey, actually, I'm thinking something else, and the person explodes and goes crazy, commits violence, yells, shames, screams, the next time, if we were in a relation, like a friendship, if I was doing, because you can have manipulative friendships, the next time, Hatim, that you're going to say, hey, Lucas, I don't know about that, you're going to think twice because, Lucas is going to throw a fit.
Yeah.
It's going to be a
3-day
fight. It's not worth it. I'll let this little thing slide. And when we start letting these little things slide and slide and slide, sooner or later, we're starting to let big things slide because at that point, we've lost any sort of footing. We've become so weak that we no longer have the ability to keep the sense of morality in our culture. Obscenity laws. So in America, for instance, there are something called obscenity laws, where that is up to the community. If the community doesn't like a billboard or the community doesn't like a book, they have the right to go to the state government or the local government and say, we believe that this billboard or this book is breaking our obscenity laws. But people aren't doing it. Why? Probably one, they don't realize they have the power to do it. And two, it's not worth the fight.
Yeah.
Because
I get it.
People are going to come after their jobs. People are going to lose their jobs. People are going to lose their livelihood. They're going to have their name put all over the place.
I
it's
think
not worth it.
Now you have put it in a way that we can understand, because this was always a concern to us. Why isn't anyone saying anything about it? But now it's very clear. Lucas, let us take a short break.
Great.
And then continue our discussion. Dear brothers and sisters, welcome back to Dome Podcast with me, Hatim Abdissalaam, and my honorable friend, Lucas. How are you today?
Doing great.
Alhamdulillah. I think we had a lot on our plate today. We've spoken about so many things. I want to touch about hate crime and racism. And I'm sure this is not something unique to here only. It's everywhere. But maybe the way we deal with it in the Eastern world is different than, in the Western world. The way I see it here in the Eastern world, religion or faith came to break racism. So once you find someone who is racist and then you hit them with the religious stick that, oh, God says that you shouldn't be racist, they can argue about that because like the divine scripture or the divine laws are sacred, even for those who are not non-practicing, so they can't say anything about it. But what's the case in the West when it comes to hate crimes, when it comes to racism, and so on?
I'll start by saying this.
Yeah.
There's racism everywhere in the world.
Definitely.
It doesn't matter what country you go to.
Yeah.
When we talk about the way that racism is being talked about now, before, in the 80s, 90s, probably early 2000s, the idea of being not racist was saying, I'm colorblind. Like, I don't see color. It doesn't matter the color of someone's skin. I'm going to treat everyone differently. But that has now changed. And in the West specifically, with the Black Lives Matter movement, or BLM, which is expressly a communist Marxist organization whose goal is to disrupt the normal family and to promote LGBTQ rights. That is on Black Lives Matter's website. They had to take it down because they got so much flack from it. That is in their express goal, to see transgenderism moved and to disrupt the husband and wife family. That's what they want to do. It's black and white in their literature.
What does that have to do with
Black
Lives Matter?
It has to do with Black Lives Matter, because what they want to do is not just, hey, everyone can be treated equally as we see them.
Yes.
But now it's changed to say, well, if you are colorblind and you're treating everyone equally, then you're racist. Instead, you have to treat everyone differently. And if someone has a certain color, or now racism has expanded to, again, this is a big term. It's called critical race theory, which is everything we were talking about in the first segment of the show. Critical race theory says that if you have a different shade of skin, that you're a little bit more oppressed. If you are identify as LGBTQ, then you're even more oppressed. If you have a series of these things, if you're LGBTQ, black, overweight, and whatever else. So it's accumulative. And the more oppressive you are, the more virtue you have, and the more you actually know what's true. So then what's happening in the West right now is saying we need to try to make everyone equal, which is called equity versus equality. Equality is you have the same rights, I have the same rights. Yes. Equity is you will have the same outcome and I will have the same outcome. So that's what's happening in the West. And the legal structure in the West, they have worked extremely hard to make sure that in the law, everyone is treated equally under the law, which is an argument that some people are saying that the West is racist in their laws, and it's called systematic racism. Yes. Systematic racism is where you say a government structure is specifically targeting certain people. That is just on its face blatantly not true in America. I've looked at the laws, I've studied that. It's just not true. To back up the question a little bit, because you said racism and you said hate crime. Hate crimes. Hate crime. Because eventually racism leads to hate crimes. Well, but hate crime, again, it doesn't make any sense on its face. If I commit a crime against you, Hatim, I don't know you, but I commit a crime against you, wouldn't you say it's a hate crime no matter what? Maybe I don't know. Because if I love you, I wouldn't, commit a crime. If I love you, I wouldn't commit a crime. Yeah. So if I steal something from anyone, I don't know who they are, I found a car and I broke in and I stole something, that's a hate crime. But what this is, the whole idea of having a hate crime, or someone should be charged worse because the crime was somehow, how do we determine this in a court of law? I don't know. Labeled as a hate crime. Labeled? Why? Oh, because the person was of a different color ethnicity as the other person. Again, this goes all the way back to the Marxist postmodern agenda to disrupt normative families and societies, to pit races and people against one another. You asked the question in the first segment, how can people of the book build friendship together, build community together?
Yes.
And the very simple answer, which every single person listening to this show can do, you find someone that doesn't look like you and you have them sit at your table. You have them over for dinner.
Yes.
And look, we don't have room at our table for every person in the world, for every poor person, for everyone who's in need, everyone that's hungry, but everyone has room for one person. Find someone that doesn't look like you.
And that used to be the case, where people recognized the differences, but they accepted the differences.
Yes.
People used to live in one community.
Yes.
Yeah, but now, even people who are a carbon copy of you, from your tribe, from your family, from your color, from your race, you don't accept them.
Yeah.
It has now reached to an extent where it all has to do with you.
Yes.
Only.
But that's because
I don't care about what happens to the rest of the world.
You're God now, right? It's humanism. Man is, as they say in the West, live your truth. Just live your truth. What does that even mean? Live my truth?
Meaning?
Meaning what? It means you are the person that gets to decide what is true. Who just do whatever makes you feel good. Do what makes me feel good? If I did what makes me feel good, my life would be a wreck.
Yeah, and everything's going to be a chaos.
Yeah.
Just imagine if I decide to do what makes me feel good, then let's say I will drive my car 200 kilometers per hour. It makes me feel good. Gives me the adrenaline, spike. So does that make it right?
That's the question. But when we, as you said as well, the people of the book, we believe in divine revelation. But when you essentially say, you move from the fact that we believe in a God that is intricately involved in our lives to saying there is no God, well, then what do you fill it with? Well, you fill it with man as the evolutionary pinnacle of the universe, and we become God, and then you become God, and you become the sayer of what is true or not.
And also the idea, I think most of the people are moving away from the idea of divine or something higher than you. They want to eliminate the idea of responsibility and accountability. Mm-hmm. Because the moment you believe in a higher supreme power, then you would know for sure that for every action there is a reaction.
Yes.
And there is consequences for my action in this world.
Yeah.
And I don't want that. I want freedom. I want to do whatever I want.
Yes.
I want to go to work naked. So that's not going to work if I believe in God and do this. It doesn't work. Now, I think when it comes to the issues that we have in smaller communities, and then you have issues like in the bigger scale, like winter is coming and Europe is going to suffer because of the
energy crisis,
the crisis of gas and the war between Russia and Ukraine. Talking about us being together, feeling the same feelings, sharing our concerns, how does it feel? What's the concern? What is happening in Europe? How are the people going to cope in the cold weather?
I'm going to zoom out a little bit more because the crisis is in Europe, but we've seen inflation through the roof across the globe.
Yes.
After the pandemic, we saw legislation put in place that crippled the global economy.
Yes.
That crippled the shipping. We don't realize how highly complex of a system that we all live in, and that when one thing goes wrong, everything is disrupted.
Yes.
And so what Europe is going to experience what America is going to experience when it comes to whether it's inflation or then turns to deflation, which is actually worse, where the economy is unable to grow. It will have massive, massive impact on everyone here in the Middle East, in Africa, in the Solomon Islands. It doesn't matter where you are going to feel the shifting of the tide, as many people, many experts are saying we are heading towards one of those macro global shifts, which will be quite bumpy, a bumpy ride for many people. So I think that the way to defend ourselves against it,
yes,
again, it's meet your neighbor, find someone that doesn't look like you, build a relationship. The other thing, and this is what I did, you mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm a baker. I have a bakery. You just opened a bakery. That doesn't make sense to me in some ways, but for so many years I was caught up in the media world. So many screens. Everything is, separated from people. And increasingly I began to say, I need to integrate into the community around me. I need to connect with the physical world around me. And so that means turn off the YouTube, turn off the show.
The gadgets.
the infinite scroll. Look at your kids and spend time with them. You want to make sure your kids don't go down a bad road? Play with your kids. By the time a child is 14, get this, an average child consumes 18,000 hours of media by the time they're 14. That's 6 years of 8 hours a day of media as a full-time job. And so if you want to defend your kids from what's coming, it doesn't matter. It does not matter where you live. They are on the phone. They are on the screen. They're watching the TV. And they are getting the messaging that's coming out. Remember what I said in the beginning. It was take over the media. If you want to protect your kids, play with them. Just play with them. Go outside and play.
You touched on the wound, Lucas. Play with them.
Yeah.
Keep them away from what is being projected on media. We have Disney.
Yeah.
Our kids' favorite platform.
Oh, Disney.
And we have Netflix. What's going on with these two companies or organizations? It used to be the safest zone. All the channels are censored. I'm very happy to watch Disney animation movies with my kids. But now I'm concerned. I can't. There's no other safe space. Even if we are working parents, we don't have time. The least we can do is, at least during the weekend, we'll watch an animated movie with the kids together with the popcorn in the house. We're spending time together, close to one another.
Yeah.
But now even that we can't do. I'm not so sure how it works back in the West, but here in the Middle East, it's just going crazy. The reason why I'm asking you this is that you have the nudity and the porn industry, which almost does not exist in this part of the world. And
the industry doesn't exist.
The industry,
but the addiction
is
real.
there. But I mean, if we see a poster in the streets of Muscat today, it's almost impossible, and you're gonna have the blackout that we had day before yesterday on the streets because of that poster. Yeah, but it's very common where you're coming from. Yeah. We still fail to understand how it works when it comes to your family and kids. I went to Amsterdam for a workshop, and one of my friends told me, after the class, let's go and see the city. I said, okay, let's go and see the city.
Oh my.
And he took me to red light district. And there was nudity all over the place, and You know, what shocked me is how everybody thought this is okay and normal. And what shocked me more is to see the families with their kids with ice cream and, you know, they're just crossing the streets and as if all of these naked women, they don't exist.
Oh, it's
what's
that's
going
the tip
on?
of the that's the tip of the iceberg.
What's going on, Lucas? Please fill me in. And I'm just lost.
You know what? I wish it was just that bad, but in the West, again, as I said, there's a scripture that says, because man has exchanged the truth of God for a lie, which is that there is no God, God has given them over to darkness and given them over to the desires of their heart. And the result is they exchanged natural relations with unnatural relations. So it's written in the holy books that when you exchange the truth of who God is for a lie, in time, God will say, you know what? Ahlan wa sahlan, go for it. Like, if this is what you want, you will then reap what you sow. And so in the West, there are, this is so insane. It's called drag shows, trans drag shows, where men dress up like women and do things that I don't even feel comfortable sharing. But parents these days think that it's a good idea to take their kids to these drag shows where the performers are doing things that you would see inside strip clubs. And they're like, oh, this is great. You know, my kid needs to know.
We don't have strip clubs, so I don't know what happens.
I've never been in a strip club. But you've seen it on a movie. You've seen it on the movie.
Today, I think
fast forward the scene, like, okay, yeah.
I think the Arab viewers today who are watching this session is going to be beeping all over the show.
Yeah.
You know, the amount of ideas and concepts that we have mentioned today, I think.
But Hatim, these ideas are in our kids' face every day. Every day.
I'm worried, man.
So as you brought up Disney, a video was leaked back in March of 2020. So March of 2022, March of this year. In this video, it was a conference of all the top Disney execs. The top Disney execs coming out and saying, I have 2 trans children, and I started to look at all of our characters and realized we didn't have very many LGBTQ leads. So it's not stories. It's not like they're telling gay stories, but they are. And you see it. When you watch a video, you're like, that character, they're trying to send a message about who that character is. And so they are intentionally writing into Disney films LGBTQ characters so that kids then are normalized by this 18,000 hours. If you think that, you know, taking your kid to a religious class 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week is going to do it for them, that's going to beat out the school system, which is how many hours of their life, media, 18,000 hours by the time they're 14, you'll be mistaken. The media is the most influential thing. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, TV. Turn off the TV, limit screen time, play with your kids. Build that friendship with your kids. That is what we have to do as parents.
SubhanAllah, I think it's a lot to digest, Lucas. But I think I'm glad that we both are part of media and we're trying our level best, even though it's just like 0.0000001 effect. But at least we're voicing our concerns out there, and we're educating people on what is right and what is wrong. Shows like this one, Lucas, and the discussions, the depth of the discussions that we're having today is what should happen in every household.
Yes.
You know, people should talk about their concerns, especially people in the Middle East who think that they are still living in a bubble and that whatever's happening out there in the West is not going to come to our shores. But it is coming to our shores. You can't block it.
I mean, Hatim, how many conversations are you having with people here where their kids are already struggling with these?
So many, man. So many. Unfortunately, to say this, but so many.
Like, it's here. It's on our shores here in the Middle East.
We can choose to be ignorant and just pretend that everything is okay, but it's not. You know, a few minutes ago, I spoke about pornography. There was a statistics done on the search engines for pornography, and the highest rate of search is from the Middle East.
Yep.
So yes, we don't produce this industry. We're not contributors to this industry, but we are contributors because we are the most people who are, logging on to these. It's just crazy. What can we say? All right, I'm very much interested about family ties, which is something that concerns you and me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also one of the solutions to the problems that we have today in the world, first of all, is to have faith. Second is the family ties.
Yes.
And if you notice, all of these movements that are happening, they are targeting to break families.
Yes.
And when you break families,
Yes.
you have no more resistance out there.
Yeah.
So how can we first of all, I'm very, very happy to know you and to get to have these discussions with you, and I'm very happy that you are being Omanized now. You have 4 kids, which is something great. I wish if we had 6 or 7 or 8.
Inshallah, ya Rab.
Inshallah, because the more kids we have, the bigger families we have. I'm sure 100 years ago, your grandparents had 10 kids, 20 kids.
Oh,
they had a big table there, all had dinner together, and so on. That's disappearing now.
Yeah.
You know, couples have a cat or a dog, and that's it. We don't want kids.
Yeah.
To an Arab who lives in the desert and has a camel, that's crazy.
Yeah.
You can't convince them that, you shouldn't have kids.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So what's the thing, man, about having kids and family ties?
Yeah, family ties. I mentioned that list in the beginning of the show, the 45 objectives to overthrow values and Western society. One of those was to get kids to be raised away from their families.
Yes.
So as you said, all of this is targeting family. Family is the strongest stabilizer of society. The larger goal, remember, if we are getting caught in these weeds, we're going to lose arguments because people are going to say, well, you're not being empathetic. You don't care. Love is love. Like, why don't you just love these people more? You're bigoted. You're closed-minded. We will lose the conversation.
Yeah.
But if we step back and we realize there's something bigger at play, which is to strip autonomy, to strip people from being able to stand on their own as family and take care of their family and take care of themselves. If you can take that away from people, then you have to rely on the government. And if you have to rely on the government, then the government owns you. That's the goal. So when it comes back to family, I was in a conversation. So that's, to recap, that's why there's such an attack on family.
Yeah.
I was in a conversation recently with someone here, Pakistani, and we were talking about kids and family, and this conversation is happening in the West, and it's happening here, which is, man, I don't want to raise my kids in this world. Look how dark the world is. Look how many problems there are. I don't want to put my kids into that. Look at population is growing and we're going to have a catastrophe, when really we're facing population collapse, but that's another story. And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, man, us as a family, we want to have more and more kids. And this is why, as I'm sure you agree with. If we raise our kids to solve problems, not to just memorize what they need to memorize and check all the right boxes, because remember, if we just teach them to say the right answers, then when the right answer is LGBTQ, they're going to say LGBTQ. We need to raise them with freedom of belief, freedom of thought, which means freedom of speech. So we need to talk about these things in the home. We need to say, this is what we believe. This is why. Let's talk about it. Let's have it out in the open.
Let them have
Let's
critical
think
thinking, yeah.
If we can raise our kids that way, and we can raise our kids to be people who solve the world's problems, to be people of light in a dark world, people of hope in a dark world. That's how we're raising our kids. That's how I know you're raising your kids. Then why wouldn't we want a dozen of them?
Some of my family members had an issue with me. I have two boys who are 8 and 10, and I spoke to them openly about LGBT. I showed them images, spoke to them in detail. I showed them the pride and everything else. And I thought that it is necessary at this point of time to educate my kids on what is going on.
You have to.
You know, they are no longer kids. You know, the kids are so smart. They understand every single thing. So stop treating them like babies and talk to them, make them understand so that they are aware. And today, me and you are alive. Tomorrow we're dead.
Perfect.
They should have the moral compass
to
know what is right and what is wrong. And faith is to back that.
It is.
Faith gives them the path where they will always be on the straight path, no matter what's happening out in the world. And for those who are out there thinking that, I'm not going to have kids because it's not a safe world, there's so much darkness.
Global warming, all that stuff.
Bring kids to this world who will change this reality.
Yes.
Who's going to make a positive change.
Please.
Have 10 kids like Lucas.
No, that is it.
I seriously don't want to end this show, but unfortunately we are running out of time, and this is the last minute on the show, my dear friend. But what's your last words to our brothers and sisters in the Middle East and our brothers and sisters in the West? The mic is yours.
The mic is mine. That's a broad question. I would go back to the overarching theme of our conversation, which is, if you try to win this battle in the small details down here and you don't understand the bigger strategies that are going on, you're going to lose. And then the second thing is, find people who don't look like you, who don't think like you, and who disagree with you, and become their friend. Not just be kind to them once. Become friends with them. Give to them sacrificially. And as we do that, we will then begin to see the world differently, and they will begin to see the world differently, and that will make the world a better place.
لوكاس العماني، شكرا جزيلا على قبول الدعوة في البرنامج، ونراك في لقاء آخر بإذن الله تعالى. And I'm going to come for the bread. Please try his bread. Seriously, you will love it.
Please do.
Dear brothers and sisters, thank you very much for watching Dome Podcast, and I was very much entertained and I was educated today about so many concepts. So see you next episode, inshallah, from me, your host, Hatim Abdissalaam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.